Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and fellow human beings, I trust that you are well, and I welcome you to this webinar presentation where today we will delve into the topic of negative states. And by the term negative states, we are talking about everything from stress, misery, anxiety, depression, loneliness, anger, grief, insecurity, fear, loss, trauma, shame, etc. And that image that you see of me here, where I am holding my head in my hand and looking all sad, well, that image is symbolic of what it means to be in a negative state. It represents the immense suffering of a negative state. And so together in this webinar, we will go far, we will go wide, we will go high, and we will go deep on the subject of negative states, where you will learn everything that you need to know about why you have a negative state of being and how to overcome it. So please do allocate at least a few hours from your schedule so that you are free from distractions and can really focus your attention on what you are about to learn. And what will you learn today? Well, this is an extensive webinar where you will learn about the functions and causations of human psychology. You will discover the psychology behind why you think and feel the way you do, and therefore whatever you want more of in your life, but it never happens, and whatever you want less of in your life, but it keeps happening, you will learn how these outcomes correlate with your psychology. And in particular, we will explore the subjects of the conditioned mind-body, learned behaviors, the fixed identity, the problematic character, the negative feedback loop, and about what it takes for you to overcome the negative states that you experience in your life. And you will learn so much more. And after you have watched this webinar, you will be enlightened, educated, and empowered with the knowledge and awareness that you need to make key breakthrough changes in your life. You will come to know important things about you that you didn't know before. And what you will learn will blow your mind. It will blow your mind wide open with life-altering epiphanies that radically shifts your perspective. And that's a good thing, because what we perceive, we achieve. And therefore, a positive shift in your perception is what you need to start cultivating a life that expresses your truest, highest, and fullest potential. So for certain, this is a webinar that you don't want to miss. And at the end of this webinar, I will give you an open invitation to join the Mind Games exclusive membership program and community, which is an online platform created by me that provides you the psychological knowledge, tools, techniques, and strategies to help you cultivate mental and lifestyle wealth. And it's mental and lifestyle wealth creation together, because you can't have one without the other. Because the game of life is first won or lost inside the mind, where the quality of your psychology determines the quality of your lifestyle. Which now brings me to, who am I? Who am I? Why should you listen to me? And why should you trust me? Well, let me first properly introduce myself. My full name is Russell Paul Arthur Bishop, and you can call me Russell or Russ. Whatever works for you is fine with me. And to explain who I am, I will keep a long story long. And so I stand here before you today with a story that has a history of tragedy and triumph. And to describe that history, we need to go back in time, where, as a youngster, I grew up within a place known as Essex, which is a county on the outskirts of London in the United Kingdom. And I was born into a family environment that was a classic rags to riches story, in that during my childhood, my parents had come into what's known as new money, and as a result of that new money, I became what is known as a spoilt brat. I was given everything and I valued nothing. And I did everything that a spoilt little brat would do to cause mayhem and mess. Now fast forward, by the time I was 16, I was a weekend drug abuser and binge drinker. I was abusing cannabis, LSD, ecstasy, and whatever booze that a little rascal like me could find and guzzle down his gluttonous neck. Fast forward some more years. By the time I was 34 years of age, I was a raging and yet functioning cocaine addict and alcoholic that had somehow managed to settle down with a woman, father 3 children, build a business that afforded a somewhat extravagant lifestyle. And it was the kind of extravagance that meant I had a luxurious motor yacht moored down on the south coast of England. And I don't say that to boast. In fact, far from it. Because back then, on the outside, it looked like I was living this postcard, picturesque lifestyle of wealth and success. Yet the life I had cultivated was one of immense stress, huge debt, and I was abusing drink and hard drugs in which to ease the suffering and get some pleasurable escapism from a life that, quite frankly, I wasn't coping with. I had cultivated this monstrosity of a life where I was a slave to the money and on this daily hamster wheel of trying to service these huge debts just to keep the luxurious lifestyle going. I had cultivated a lifestyle that was distressing me, that was untenable, that was violating every aspect of my true nature. I had become someone I was not meant to be. I'd become a rags to riches archetype. I'd become a version of my parents. I'd become this cultural ideology. I had become this perversion of the real me. My entire life was a reflection of everything that society had projected onto me. But here's the thing, I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that I was living this fake life as a fake persona. I didn't know that I had constructed this huge, egotistical, narcissistic, sociopathic, delusional, and somewhat predatorial persona. I didn't know that I was wearing a fictitious mask. I didn't even know the real man behind the mask. I was so busy looking for myself out there in the world and trying to pursue the quote-unquote successful life, trying to get the status, the money, the possessions, and whatever else would float my boat, that I hadn't discovered nor developed who I was in here. I was so utterly concerned with trying to be the big I am that I had constructed this persona, this mask that hid away the little I am part of me inside. That hidden part of me was the part of me that was deeply fearful, insecure, ashamed, unknowing, and stupid. As a result of living a feigned life as this fake persona, I experienced the immense stress and struggle of juggling a lifestyle that was ill-suited for me. And I became addicted to powerful, mind-bending and soul-destroying drugs, which led to a complete and utter breakdown. And it took place in slow motion. Over many years, I started to slowly come undone and unravel into a cataclysmic mess. And because I was so ungrounded, disordered, and with a gun-ho persona that pulled the trigger first and asked questions never, my history is one of misstep after misstep, one of many failed ventures, big mistakes and massive consequences of which I endured immense hardship and suffering, where over the course of about 8 years I went through 5 failed careers, 4 failed businesses, 2 bankruptcies, asset repossessions, a hard split from my partner that ended up in the courts, and separation from my 3 children, in which I have experienced 3 mental breakdowns, a financial rock bottom, where I've been homeless for long periods of time, and where I have even had brief spells of living down and out on the streets, where I was so broke that it was just me, a tent, and some clothes. And they are the kind of life experiences that make you go, ouch, that really hurts. And throughout most of that, I suffered in silence, with every bridge to the people that I loved blown to smithereens and covered in a dust pile of broken promises. I had no one to turn to. You see, back then my life was a bitter, sour symphony. It was a bad orchestration of feeling worthless, purposeless, loveless, and hopeless. And it got so bad at one stage in my life that I submerged into the cold and desolate depths of an apocalyptic despair, of which I was severely depressed for over 1.5 years and living in abject sorrow. It was the kind of depression that left me bedridden for many days at a time, where I would often remain indoors like a broken hermit. And it was a time of my life where I despised every genetic fibre of the barbaric ogre that I thought I was. In every way that I viewed myself, I was a grotesque mess, this empty shell of a man, this shadow of my former shadow, where my entire life had ripped apart and disintegrated into nothing, where I spent many years of life bouncing along a hard rock bottom, unable to catch a break, unable to experience happiness, security, or love, where I was in this constant state of negativity, pessimism, and nihilism. It was a really awful time, and a kind that I would not wish upon anyone. And yet, despite all of that, I'm still here. I'm still standing, and I'm feeling happier, stronger, optimistic, and more loving and determined than ever. Today, I live a life that is the full embodiment and expression of my truest, highest, and fullest potential. But how? How did I go through all of that tragedy to emerge triumphant? Well, as the result of a monumental lifestyle collapse and psychological breakdown, during one specific day in my past, I experienced this awakening event. It was during my lowest ebb, my darkest hour, when I was unable to see any beauty inside the beast, when I realized that I couldn't carry on with all of that suffering, where I had sadly reasoned that I would rather be dead than continue feeling the excruciating pains of staying alive. I had reached a point where I just couldn't go on as I was. I was sick and tired of making these huge mistakes that caused so much pain. And I had resigned to the fact that it was me, that I was the cause of my affliction, that I could not continue living as me. And what I didn't know at the time was that I had finally surrendered. I had finally surrendered my ego, and in that moment of surrender, I experienced a profound insight and realization. Within seconds, my entire life had flashed before my eyes as though I was an outsider looking into my complete life story with lucid clarity, and for the first time, I could see that I was running away from the truths of me. I was running away from all of the mistakes I had made. I was running away from my fears and insecurities. And throughout my entire life, I was trying so desperately hard to become someone else, someone I thought I should be, someone that society said I should be, someone like my parents and my friends. And in doing so, rather than cultivate the talents, strengths, and skills of my true nature, I was following these external influences. I was working towards these cultural ideals of the successful life, where I had mistakenly believed that I needed to earn lots of money, get the status and possessions in which to feel significant, worthy, lovable, and likable. And in trying to find out who I was out there, I lost who I was in here. I had developed this outward persona that was vain, superficial, and materialistic, where the truth of me, the person inside, was someone I neglected, someone I denied, someone that I criticized and frowned upon, someone that I had persecuted for not being good, strong, or worthy enough. Who I truly was inside was a huge part of me that was left unnurtured, undeveloped, unknowing, unloved, and living within the fears and insecurities of uncertainty. And so I had built this mask, which was the outward persona, where the outward persona was faking it because my genuine self was too afraid to make it. And as the fake persona, I had become a man on a mission impossible. I was self-deceptive, in self-denial, and living a distorted life that was way beyond my authentic capabilities. I was engaging with life experiences that stimulated the fake persona, and yet they caused immense suffering to the inward person, who was the truth of me. And because my feigned life experience did not feed my soul, there was nothing that could fulfill this growing void within. Inside of me was this growing void of unmet potential. The unmet potential was the innate talents, strengths, and skills of my true nature that were neglected, and yet gasping with discontent for expression. Who I was deep inside was deeply unsatisfied, deeply upset, deeply disappointed, and deeply confused with the life that I was living on the outside. And I was living with such a void of emptiness, discontent, and suffering that I needed more and more consumption, entertainment, distraction, and chemical alleviation in which to suppress that internal suffering. And it was only when my entire lifestyle had collapsed that my fake persona collapsed with it to reveal the true me. That's because my persona was a superficial mask that was attached to and stimulated by the externals of my life. And once those externals were gone, i.e. the home, the money, the possessions, the people, the experience, everything that had affirmed my fake persona, once all of that was gone, I fell inwards. I fell inwards into this void of unknowingness and nothingness, because the person within was so lost, so unknowing, and so weak. And so, at 36 years of age, after 3 decades of living as this fake egoic persona, and after that persona dissolved, I was left in a place of utter mental desolation. I was this man-child, a person with childish logic trapped inside an adult's body. Those decades of habitual drug and drink abuse, egocentrism, and self-denial, they had frozen over my intellect and emotions, leaving me with the mental capacity of a naive, immature, and irresponsible schoolboy. And so, as a consequence of my awakening events, and realizing that I was this unactualized and undeveloped shell of a man, I then embarked on two massive life-changing journeys. One was the inner journey of self-discovery, and the other was to discover how the world out there actually works. What followed was 8 years of intensive self-development, rebuilding myself from the inside out, which involved extensive research, study, and application of psychotherapy, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, astrology, nutrition, health, and fitness, where eventually I mastered myself. I managed to overcome the negative karma of my past problems and overcome my attachments and addictions. And what I discovered about human psychology is this: that beyond the egoic mind with its fears, prejudice, anxieties, deceptions, limited beliefs, and never-ending unhappiness, I have discovered a sacred realm of inner peace and completeness within me, where I'm happy to be me, the true me, without the need to have anyone or anything else to define myself and my happiness. I discovered that I am pure conscious awareness that is free from the limitations and inferiorities of the conditioned mind, that I am the observer and the creator of my mind, not a passenger of my mind, but instead I am the driver of my mind. I also become more self-knowledgeable and self-aware and aligned with my intuition and spiritual principle, and began to express and develop my true nature. And so, who exactly did I become? Well, I'm not someone that likes labels, but if you want to pigeonhole me, then you could say that I'm a psychotherapist, a spiritual guide, and a lifestyle strategist. And that I have the wisdom, experiences, knowledge, and skills in which to help someone to resolve their mental and emotional issues, help them to discover and align with their innate talents, strengths, and skills of their true nature. And I can assist someone with finding the most effective, efficient, and elegant way of creating a lifestyle of deeper meaning, higher purpose, and greater impact. I am a man on a divine mission that is here to uplift the human spirit and be the exemplar of goodness, prosperity, truth, and love, of which I created the Mind Games brand and community to do just that. And I have also founded the Grace Trust, which is a not-for-profit organization that focuses on humanitarian projects. And so my personal story serves as both the warning and wisdom. I am the living testament that no matter what problems you face right now, with a loving spirit, warm heart, and the right mindset, not only can you rise above circumstances, you can excel to far greater heights. I'm someone that clearly demonstrates that I have been there, done that, overcome this, and here's how I did it. I was that guy who walked the 5 yards of hell and against the odds made a miraculous turnaround and comeback. And what took me half a lifetime to experience, make massive mistakes over and over again to figure things out and then make the corrections to get the right results, by learning and applying my teachings, you can get the lifestyle results that you truly desire in just a fraction of the time. And I also know deep within that your intuitive spirit has guided you to be with me here today. That your need to exalt every aspect of who you are, to awaken and activate the true you. A true you that is loving, abundant, and joyful. Well, that intention has guided you right here with me. Because there is a part of you deep within that wants you to become more, to express, create, give, and love more. A part of you which is destined for greater achievements. A part of you that is ready for expression. And so, without further ado, let's get straight to the main subjects of this webinar. And let's begin with defining what are negative states. Let's first break down the phrase negative states. With the word negative, it means that something is bad, unpleasant, unwelcome, down, low, poor, and harmful. With the word state, it means that there is a particular condition, form, order, setting, or mode. So in terms of human psychology, when we speak of being in a negative state, we are speaking about the mind and body as being in a bad condition, a low order, a poor setting, and harmful mode. We are in a negative state of being and doing. And there are three types of negative states. We have negative mental states, negative emotional states, and negative physical states, where all three of these negative states are interrelated, in that one causes and affects the others. So let's dig into this by first defining what are negative mental states. So with mental states, we are talking about what's going on in the mind. We are talking about the intellect, the cognitive function of the mind. And to experience a negative mental state, it simply means that we are thinking negatively. We have what's known as stinking thinking. We have poor, pessimistic, and problematic styles of thinking. Now, what does this actually mean? It means that we are thinking about how bad things are, how bad things could get. We are thinking about worst case scenarios. We are thinking about how useless, hopeless, pointless, unfair, sad, miserable, and tragic things are. Our thoughts are focused on the problems of life, which leads us on to what are negative emotional states. Well, let me first start by saying that the word emotion equals energy in motion. And so when we speak of emotions, we are talking about the state of our energy within, how we are feeling within. Where a negative emotional state is to feel down, heavy, low, or to feel frustrated, stressed, and anxious. And these negative emotional states can range from sorrow, depression, fear, worry, grief, feeling lonely, fatigued, angry, disgust, boredom, annoyance, feeling neglected, offended, regretful, shame, self-pity, doubt, paranoia, dejected, trauma, hopeless, worthless, purposeless, insecure, hate, jealousy, and we could go on and on. There are well over 300 different types of emotions that we can all experience. And no doubt you experience some of the negative emotions that I've just mentioned. Now let's move on to what are negative physical states. With negative physical states, we are talking about symptoms, dysfunctions, disorders, illnesses, viruses, and dis-eases within the body, where the physical fabric of the body's skin, bones, limbs, organs, and systems, they have become damaged, defective, or degenerative, where the body has a weakness, a wound, a debilitation. So this could be anything from a common cold, a headache, a cut, a broken leg, a heart disease, or a cancer, etc. So there you have it. Those are the three negative states that affect who we are, that affects our ability to function. And those three negative states, the mental, the emotional, and the physical, they are interrelated, where one triggers and causes the other. And so if we have a severe physical illness, this could negatively affect how we feel and think. If we have depressive thoughts, this could negatively affect how we feel. If we are feeling, say, fatigued in the body, this could negatively affect the way we think. And to experience a negative state more than less, in that we are always thinking and feeling poorly, this is when life can become this uphill battle of struggle and suffering, where our ability to function normally, optimally, positively, and productively is greatly diminished. Now, I need to point out to you right here the differences between an acute negative state and a chronic negative state. With the acute negative state, the symptoms are intense or severe, but only last for a short duration. So, for example, we can feel depressed about something, and then that depression quickly subsides and we feel happy again. With chronic negative states, however, the depression is lasting, enduring, and persistent. It never goes away. It is a state of being that is always present within the mind and body. And in this webinar today, we are going to explore what it means to be in a chronic negative state. To experience negativity more than less, whereby a persistent negative state is impeding and limiting the quality of our life. And for that, we are going to explore the topic of the conditioned mind body. What is the conditioned mind body? Well, let's start with the term mind body. It means that the mind is the body and the body is the mind. Both mind and body are inextricably linked. What happens to the body is affecting your state of mind, and what's happening in your mind is affecting your state of body. And so if you are having negative thinking, then for sure you are going to manifest negative emotions, negative energy, negative symptoms within the body. If you have negative emotions or physical symptoms within the body, then for sure you are going to manifest negative thoughts. So you have a mind-body where one affects the other. Now, in context of the mind-body, what do I mean by conditioned? I mean that there is a certain state, a quality, a way, a performance, a skill, a working order or disorder that has become a permanent trait of the mind and body, where the conditioned mind-body is habitually and repetitively functioning and behaving in a certain manner, where the mind-body has this predisposition to operate in a certain mode, where this condition is determining, influencing, and controlling the way you think, feel, and express yourself. And there are three main elements to the conditioned mind-body. Those three elements are that you have a learned behavior, you have an unconscious trait, and you have a fixed identity. So let's delve into these three separate elements, starting with learned behavior. What is a learned behavior? Simply put, as the result of your past life experiences, you have learned to do something a certain way. You have learned a knowledge or skill in which to perform, to act, to conduct yourself. And this could be a behavior that you have learned yourself, And this could be a behavior that was taught to you by another. Now, in terms of negative thoughts and emotions, are these learned behaviors? Yes or no? Well, let's think about it. Were you born thinking? Were you born with a wide range of emotions? Were you born thinking and feeling negatively? Of course, the answer is no. Whilst, yes, you were born with the faculties and capacity to think and feel, both your thoughts and emotions are behaviors that you have learned as you have journeyed through your life. From your childhood experiences at home, at school, in your social groups, and then as you embarked on a career, developed close relationships, maybe settled down with someone, and maybe started a family of your own, you learned how to think, you learned how to express certain emotions. You also learned how to be in a negative state. During the different stages of your life, there were certain negative experiences and events that took place which have now become these key memories, where you experience some type of psychological or physical hurt, abuse, harm, or trauma. And as a result of these negative experiences and events in the past, you learned how to think and feel negatively. You learned how to react or how to cope in a way that elicits a negative state of being and doing, where this learned behavior has now become a pattern, a default mode, a repeatable skill, a familiar state of being and doing, where you become very good and efficient at thinking and feeling negatively, especially when reminded of and confronted by negative situations today that are similar to those negative experiences and events in the past. Is this making sense? Now let's move on to the second element of a conditioned mind-body, where you have developed unconscious traits. What do I mean by the term unconscious traits? Well, let's begin with defining what human consciousness is. Human consciousness has two aspects. There is the conscious aspect and the unconscious aspect. The conscious aspect of the mind is to be aware of the self, and the unconscious aspect is to be unaware of the self. In other words, we have a dual aspect consciousness. We are always in a simultaneous state of awareness and unawareness. At the same time, we are both awake and asleep to who we are and what we are doing. And now here is the really interesting part. The conscious aspect is around 5% of your power. The unconscious aspect of who you are is around 95% of your power. That means that you are roughly 95% unaware of what's taking place in your physical avatar, unaware of why and how it's taking place. And nature has designed us humans with this power differential for specific reasons. We have the power of conscious awareness in which to focus our attention on decoding and defining reality, so that we can be aware and thoughtful of how we experience reality. Whereas the largest power of unconsciousness is reserved for the important bodily functions that operate autonomously. For example, our heartbeat rests somewhere between 60 to 90 beats per minute. The lungs, they automatically breathe, and blood automatically circulates throughout the body to service the vital organs and systems, thanks to the subtle operations of the unconscious aspect. And for our entire lifespan, the unconscious part of who we are is this amazing powerhouse of life force that keeps the body alive and ticking, even though, for the most part, we are unaware of its processes. Just like you are not aware of your breathing until that is that you place your conscious awareness and focus on your breathing. The same ethos applies to your behavior. You are not fully aware of what you are thinking, saying, and doing until you focus on these aspects of your behavior. This means that unless you focus on and observe your behavior, you are not fully aware of your behavior. And so when you are not consciously observing yourself, you are just the unconscious passenger of your actions. And it's the fact that you are unaware of how and why your negative states arise into your being, which is why you feel like you don't have the control to stop and change the way you think and feel. And if what I'm saying does not make absolute sense to you just yet, it will begin to make sense as we move through this webinar. Because you will notice that I repeat things a lot. I say the same thing, but in a slightly different way. And I do this on purpose so that it drills home the information, the points that I'm giving to you. And right now, I want you to try a little experiment. This little experiment will show you the difference between the conscious and unconscious aspect of who you are. I want you to now focus on this logo on the right side of the screen that says play to win. Because that's why you're here, right? You're here to play the right mind games to win. So really narrow your focus down onto that logo. Observe and concentrate on reading the words play to win. Now this would be you engaged with your conscious awareness. You are consciously awake and aware and observing that logo. Now I want you to stay looking at the logo, but now defocus your attention so that you include your periphery vision. And you should notice that the rest of the room that you are in has come into the awareness of your vision, where you are now aware of the logo and the entire room that is within your periphery vision. Now I want you to realize that whenever you are directly focused on a certain aspect of reality with your conscious awareness, at the very same time, you are unconsciously experiencing the periphery vision. You are experiencing roughly 90 to 95% more of reality than the reality that you are focused on and aware of. And the takeaway lesson from that little experiment is this: we become conscious of the unconscious the moment that we focus our attention on it. We become aware of what we were once unaware of the moment we place our attention there. And so if you want to understand why and how you personally experience negative states, then you need to become aware of those unconscious aspects of your psychology. So this begs the question, why does the majority of your psychology operate unconsciously and beyond your awareness? Well, the unconscious aspect of the mind body is the internal storage house for all of our life experiences. All of those important and useful life experiences that we learned and remembered for our survival, productivity, and navigation, they are stored within the unconscious aspect of the mind body so that we can remember to avoid or repeat those experiences at a later date. These life experiences have become internalized, memorized, and embodied within the psychoneurological fabric of the mind-body. And the main purpose of this intelligent design is so that all of that information, all of those past life experiences that we have learned, they can be filed away in the back of our mind. Otherwise, if we had access to everything that we know in every single second and moment of the day, it would drive us around the absolute bend. The information would be so overwhelming that it would drive us stir crazy. We would be so overloaded with thoughts and emotions that we would not be able to function. So instead, everything about who we are and what we have learned throughout our lifetime is stored in the unconscious aspect beyond our immediate awareness, where we can quickly access learned knowledge and skills in the moment as and when we need it. Also, that which is stored in the unconscious is how we develop repetitive, efficient, and effective behaviors. What is learned and stored within the unconscious aspect of self becomes our habitual traits. Habitual traits are behaviors that we consistently repeat. These habitual traits are patterns of behavior that are encoded or conditioned within the mind body so that we have both a mind memory and muscle memory. Now I want you to please pay attention to what I am about to say now. The conditioned mind body is where you have habitual traits that are unconscious. You have unconscious traits, where by memory you automatically repeat certain behaviors and you do so without second thought, without reflection, without constraint, and without the awareness that you do. That's because your unconscious traits are on autopilot mode. You think and feel autonomously, involuntarily, reflexively, and reactively, where your unconscious traits have roughly 95% dominance and control over your behavior. In simpler words, when you are expressing an unconscious trait, you have no recognition and no control over what you do. And because your unconscious traits are repetitive, on average, 95% of what you think, feel, say, and do is what you have always thought, felt, said, and done. Now dwell on the significance of that statement for a moment. I said that on average, 95% of what you think, feel, say, and do is what you have always thought, felt, said, and done. This means that for the most part of your life, that you are replaying the recording of your previous life experiences. You are repeating your learned behaviors. You are reliving the same reality as the same self over and over again. You are like a self-automated machine. And where negative states are concerned, you are unconsciously repeating the same negative thoughts and emotions, recycling them throughout the day, the week, the month, the year, the decade, your entire life. And it may be a different day and you might be in a different location, but your conditioned mind body with its unconscious traits will experience the same bad thoughts, the same bad emotions, the same stress, the same anguish, the same misery, the same patterns of behavior that you can't seem to stop or escape from. Which brings us to the next topic, which is to explore the fixed identity. What is the fixed identity? The fixed identity is a phrase that I use to define the psychology of how we all become fixed upon this identification with self. A fixed identity that has fixed qualities, in that we identify with ourselves as being a certain person with specific values and beliefs, where you have this fixed identity that is limited to the experiences that you identify with, where this fixed identity has a narrow-minded viewpoint and restricted perception, in that you can only see yourself as being this way and not being that way. You have defined who you are and you have defined who you are not. For example, I could say that I am Russell Bishop, I am a psychotherapist, spiritual guide, and a lifestyle strategist, which is true. But does that define who I am? Am I limited to those experiences? The answer is no. Why? Because for me personally, I'm not fixated on those words and terms to define my experience. I am free to become and do whatever I want and whenever I decide. But this is not the case for most people. Most people become so attached to their self-identity to a point that they cannot see themselves as being anyone other than the person, the label, the title, the experience that they have identified with and accepted. And this fixed identity is the result of all of your past experiences combined. You have memorized and learned that affirms you with a sense of self, which affirms you with this identity of being a certain character. And in terms of negative states, you can condition, affirm, and reinforce negative states into the unconscious aspect of your mind body when you repeatedly identify with yourself as being or having this negative experience or trait. So for example, if I continually say I have social anxiety, I have depression, I am lonely, I am stressed, and I keep repeating this over and over, then by identification and repetition, this will become my learned experience that develops into an unconscious trait that is conditioned within my mind body. Is this now making sense to you? Can you now understand the psychology behind how you experience and develop negative states? You see, it is through repetition, when we continually repeat a certain behavior, that it becomes an ingrained trait. And the more that we repeat thoughts, words, and actions, it's like we are brainwashing ourselves. We are hypnotizing ourselves into accepting and believing that we are that behavior. And this negative brainwashing takes place when we are outspoken with others through negative self-talk, and when we use our inner voice and thoughts to criticize, doubt, fear, and condemn who we are and how we feel. And so once we have become fixated on a condition that we've identified with as being a part of who we are, this becomes a part of the fixed identity, where the fixed part of our identity equals the perception that drives our behavior and produces the outcome. In other words, who you believe you are is the way that you will see and experience reality. And here is where I want to explore deeper with you on how and why a fixed identity comes to be, where we explore the psychological factors of a fixed identity and why unfixing yourself from a specific identity, unfixing yourself from negative labels and narratives, is absolutely crucial in order for you to let go of any negative baggage that you carry around, so that you can experience personal growth and lifestyle development. And so, to keep this compact, I will get straight to the points that you really need to know. Here are the 4 points you need to know about a fixed identity. Number 1, we only focus on the parts of reality that correspond with our perception. Okay, so our individual perception is aligned with the guiding values and beliefs of our fixed identity, which means that through our 5 senses, we experience and decode the objective reality out there through the subjective bias of our fixed identity. And the subjective bias of a fixed identity with its narrow-minded perception is why we have a world of different people with differing views that live distinguishable lifestyles. For example, the fixed identity and perception of an affluent banker who values extravagance and believes that financial wealth is success will experience reality entirely different to the fixed identity and perception of a down-and-out drug addict who values the next hit and believes there is no hope. And what separates the affluent banker from the drug addict is their fixed identities and the way that they perceive reality. They perceive reality differently from each other because they identify with different guiding values and beliefs, and this means that they focus on and gravitate towards different experiences. It is the values and beliefs of their fixed identity that perceives and achieves. And once you change the values and beliefs of that fixed identity, you change your life. So for example, if the drug addict were to upgrade the values and beliefs of his or her fixed identity, then he or she would perceive a better reality and upgrade their life conditions. Likewise, if through various misfortunes the affluent banker downgraded the values and beliefs of his fixed identity, he could find himself begging for money on the streets. Which also means that if you were to change the values and beliefs that you have associated to the negative states that you identified with, then you would change the way you think and feel about yourself and your life. You would perceive and achieve differently. Number 2, the fixed identity therefore has a psychological scotoma. This means that through the psychological filters of our fixed identity, we actually delete and distort the parts of reality that don't affirm the values and beliefs of our fixed identity. This means that we are blindsided to any positive aspects of reality that conflict with or disprove our negative conditions within. We obfuscate the facts of reality to instead perceive reality as we would prefer it to be. We don't see reality as it is, we see reality as we are. And so, we always manifest a reality that corresponds with our fixed reality. And this is why we can't wait for people or circumstances to change out there in order to start thinking and feeling better. Because the fixed identity of who we are will never focus on, never move towards, never recognize nor appreciate that which is beyond its scope of seeing. In other words, if you want to see change out there, you must first change who you are within. You must change the way you perceive in order to change the way you achieve. The change begins within. Moving on to number 3, the fixed identity is the reason that we can experience cognitive dissonance, where there is outright disagreement with information that conflicts with our values and beliefs. We can also adjust the facts of reality to match our way of thinking, rather than adjust our thinking to match the facts of reality. So again, the fixed identity is blindsided to anything that it cannot perceive. And because your fixed identity of this is who I am and this is who I am not is a mindset that gives you certainty, a sense of security and familiarity. If there is any information or experience that contradicts and conflicts with the values and beliefs that give you self-assuredness, that actually threatens the certainty, security and knowingness of who you believe yourself to be, then you are likely to deny, to defer, to refuse, to obscure, to move away from that new information and experience. And so, without challenging yourself, without breaking out of the limitations of your fixed identity, you remain stuck fast to whatever traits are conditioned within your mind body that are part of the psychology of your fixed identity. Number 4, the fixed identity will always lead to problems, pain, and suffering. That's because when you cling to the limitations of a fixed identity in a rapidly changing world, you will be met with suffering. That's because when you stick to what you've always known, you are unable to align with, adapt to, and prosper within a world that is continually evolving, updating, and upgrading. When clinging to the values and beliefs of your fixed identity, you will remain as you are, with outdated knowledge and skills, which makes you less valuable, less marketable, less effective, and more likely to become redundant in this changing world. And when you are locked into the specific values and beliefs of a fixed identity, you are blindsided and ignorant towards the opportunities and possibilities that lay beyond the finite version of reality that you perceive. When you perhaps lose or become separated from people, possessions, places that your fixed identity has grown so attached to, you will suffer a sense of loss, hurt, grievance, and depression even. And so the fixed identity is what keeps you beholden to the pains of loss and the pains of separation. Now, before we move on, I want to quickly recap this part of the webinar. So far, you have learned that you have a conditioned mind body that is the result of learned behaviors where you have developed unconscious traits and a fixed identity, where the thoughts and emotions that you experience habitually are a direct result of the past life experiences that have been memorized into the psychofabric of your unconscious aspects, where roughly 95% of who you are is unconscious conditioning. This means that you are mostly unaware of what you do and why you do it. Unaware means that you are not awake to, not aware of certain aspects of who you are and why you do the things you do. This also means, for the most part, that you act on autopilot mode. Instead of being the driver of your mind body, you are the passenger of your mind body. And whatever prominent memories, thoughts, and emotions that are encoded within your mind body, these are the predominant psycho forces that are 95% controlling your experience, where the recorded past has become the predictable present that guarantees the same future, where your negative states have become unconscious traits that guarantees the same fate. Which brings us nicely on to the next segment of this webinar, where together we discuss what it means to have the problematic character. So what is the problematic character? Well, it's exactly what it says on the tin. You have a problematic character, in that a part of your character, or the whole of your character, is problematic. And what do I mean by problematic? I mean that there is a part or whole of you that experiences difficulty, hardship, complexity, stress, and trouble in your life and your relationships. And there are 3 elements that define how a problematic character is formed in your psychology, in your mind body. and how that problematic character affects your perception and behaviour. And we begin with the first element, which is that you have identified with a negative label and narrative. So what do I mean by a negative label? Well, somewhere and at some time in your life, you have been labelled by someone else, or you have labelled yourself as being this negative character. You have identified with and accepted yourself as having a problematic character, where perhaps something bad happened in your life and you now see yourself as this stereotype, where the stereotype has a negative connotation, a negative meaning attached to it. So for example, you could have had a drug problem in the past and have now labelled yourself as the addict. You could have had a drink problem in the past and have now labelled yourself as the alcoholic. At home and growing up, you could have been different, darker, or you could have been the odd one out in your family, and so both you and them labelled you as the black sheep of the family. You get what I'm saying, right? And there are so many ways that we identify with a problematic character. It could be that you've identified with being the loner, the loser, the failure, the bankruptee, the single mother, the convict, the victim of, fill in the blank, to name but just a few labels, where that negative label has defined who you are and has defined an aspect of your life, where this negative label and narrative that you have identified with means that you have a character defect, where you have agreed with and accepted that there is something about you that is flawed, limiting, inferior, inadequate, and deficient. And once we have concluded that we are the role, the person, or characteristic trait that we've identified with, we then start to cultivate a personal narrative, a story around that label that reinforces that identity with strong values and beliefs. We then start to move away from experiences that do not affirm that role and move towards experiences that do affirm that role. We can start to develop negative mental and emotional states related to that part of our character. And so, to summarize this segment about the problematic character, there are 4 distinct ways that we internalize a problematic characteristic trait. Number 1, we identify with a derogatory label. Number 2, we define our character with a personal story that concludes we are unworthy, tainted, inferior, powerless, or irredeemable. Number 3, we value experiences and information that affirms the negative character that we identify with. And number 4, we self-stigmatize and vilify a part of who we are. And now that we have discussed what it means to identify with a problematic character, can you recognize in your life where perhaps you have latched onto and accepted a label and narrative that defines you as being defective or unworthy? And if so, when thinking about this negative label and narrative, does it make you feel good or bad? Do you feel empowered or disempowered? Does it make you feel light and free or heavy and restricted? Does it lift you up or bring you down? And now that we have explored how the psychology of a negative state is affirmed and developed, we will now explore how negative states are continually triggered within you and continually result in negative consequences that continually diminishes the quality of your life. And for that, we need to delve into the subject of the negative feedback loop. we will explore a psychological concept known as the negative feedback loop. The negative feedback loop is a concept that encapsulates what it means to be psychologically and physically conditioned to repeat the same negative behaviors that result in the same negative consequences over and over again, where there is a feedback correlation between the negativity within your mind body and the negativity that you experience in your life out there. The negative feedback loop is a detrimental cycle whereby the consistent experience of negative memories, thoughts, emotions, actions, and consequences, they take you down a pathway of diminishment where life gets worse, harder, intense, and damaging, prematurely demoralizing and degrading who we be and what we do. And whilst you remain stuck within the cycle of a negative feedback loop, it will limit and prevent you from making positive progress. And there are 6 key elements to a negative feedback loop, and we will discuss each one right now, beginning with the 4-step cycle. So here is a simple illustration that shows you the model of a negative feedback loop with its 4 different steps. Number 1, you have the negative event. Step number 2, you have the negative experience. Step number 3, you have the positive compensation. And step number 4, you have the behavior reinforcement. I also want you to notice that the cycle of this negative feedback loop is anti-clockwise. The arrows are pointing anti-clockwise, and that's because the flow of negative energy is anti-life. Negative energy is debilitating, destructive, and diminishing to the life force. The life force being your mind, soul, and body. So that's pretty straightforward, right? And now I will break down what is actually happening during the process of each step. And it begins with the first step of the negative feedback loop process, where we have been triggered by the external stimulus of a negative event. What is the negative event? Well, we have been confronted by a negative person. We have participated in a negative situation, or we find ourselves in a negative environment. Negative in that we are having to deal with a problem, a difficulty, an obstacle, a grievance of some sorts. And again, that's pretty straightforward. We all understand that. We all encounter negative events in our life, and with a negative feedback loop, we are referring to a negative event that keeps repeating in our life over and over again. Now let's look at the second step of the negative feedback loop process, where a negative event has taken place which has caused a negative experience within. Which means that a negative event was the action and our negative experience within was the reaction. We have reacted to the event in a negative way, where we have thought, felt, spoken, or acted in a negative way. And what you need to know is that a negative reaction is often a conditioned response. You are conditioned to respond a certain way to a specific stimulus. That conditioned response stems from memory. Through the automation of memory, you have responded negatively. And that memory has powerful thought forms and emotions attached to it. And when a negative event takes place, you experience a negative state. Then we move on to the third step of the negative feedback loop process. Step 3 is where the negative experience is followed by a positive compensation. Because nobody escapes the universal laws of polarity and balance. Everything about this reality, this life and human behavior is subject to the laws of polarity and balance, where energy will shift from one extremity or pole to the other, just like a pendulum, where the energy swings one way and then swings back the other. The other examples of this would be, what goes up must come down, pain is always followed with pleasure, negativity will rebound into positivity. I think you get the picture. Therefore, after a negative event and experience, we often rebound into a positive compensation. For example, when most people experience some type of harm and loss that is caused by another person, they tend to give back as good as they get, and they seek revenge to get even. Whenever people feel entrapped, overwhelmed and unable to deal with a negative situation, they look for a means of escapism to get some distance and relief from that situation. We also try to escape from the discomfort of negative thoughts and emotions, and we do this by soothing ourselves with an uplifting pleasure or comforting reward. So that would be eating comfort food, getting stimulated or soothed with alcohol, illicit or prescriptive drugs. That would also mean shopping or being entertained with digital stimulus like gaming, gambling, social media, music and TV shows. Also, directly after negative experiences, we seek sympathy and support from others, in which to offload our upsets and concerns, to feel heard and to know that someone cares. And all of these different positive compensations, well, they make us feel good. We get to indulge in activities that we like, that boosts the way that we feel and that alleviates the negative energy within. Which leads me on to the fourth step of a negative feedback loop process, and that would be the behavior reinforcement. The reason that a negative feedback loop cycle repeats is because each step of the entire process is reinforced, and we especially reinforce our own behavior each time that we rationalize and justify why it was right and necessary to behave the way that we did. Which means that you could find reasons to think that a negative event is a normal and acceptable part of life, even when the event is abnormal and unacceptable. This means that you could find reasons to affirm that you are right to behave negatively, even though you may be wrong and have acted unfairly, dishonorably, and inappropriate. You can start to believe that a negative life situation is irreversible, unchangeable, or that you are destined to experience this misfortune and hard times. You can convince yourself that you are not at fault, that you are not responsible, and that you are powerless to change the event or change your behavior, even though you could if you tried and tried and tried until you were successful. And all of these associations that you make towards the different steps of a negative feedback loop then become the reasons why you don't properly address and correct the negative event or experience. You can also deny the experience took place and distract yourself from dealing with the negative thoughts and emotions. And so, rather than reflect upon the experience, process what happened, and then think of alternative ways to deal with the negative situation in the future, you choose to deny it. And of course, life gets in the way and sweeps you off to the next moment, the next event, and the next problem. And so, you just forget all about it. And perhaps the most reinforcing part of a negative feedback loop is that you have gained a positive compensation during or shortly after the negative experience, whereby you have learned to associate and link in your mind that a positive outcome and result will occur and will occur directly after the negative experience, whereby the positive compensation has evened out, lessened or neutralized the negative experience. And because you have not addressed and resolved the negative event itself, the next time it occurs in the future, you are going to repeat the same process that has been reinforced. And with each recycle of the process, the negative feedback loop becomes more and more reinforced. The 4-step process of the cycle, it becomes deeply embedded into the psychoneurological fabric of the mind and body, until the negative feedback loop becomes unconscious and instinctive, in that you automatically and reactively respond to similar events in the future a similar way. And I will now finish this topic by saying that you have learned and formed different negative feedback loops in different situations and aspects of your life, and that a negative feedback loop can take place daily, weekly, or monthly. And if you want to learn more about negative feedback loops, then you can watch a tutorial that I have done specifically on negative feedback loops, which can be found on my social media platforms. And now let's discuss triggers and state shifts. A negative feedback loop can begin with external triggers and internal triggers. So the internal triggers would be the stimulus of a memory, thoughts, emotion, and feeling. The external triggers could be that you are triggered by the stimulus of what someone does or says. You would be triggered by your senses, in that what you see, smell, hear, touch, or taste affects the way that you think and feel. You could be triggered by a particular event, situation, or environment. And both the internal and external triggers, stimulus, and cues are interrelated, in that one triggers the other. For example, you could see something happen out there, and this triggers a memory within you. Now, when triggered by external stimulus, this elicits a reaction within you, and a reaction is typically a conditioned response, in that your mind, body is conditioned to respond a certain way. You are conditioned to automatically respond a certain way to a situational and environmental stimulus, and that conditioned response usually occurs in the context of a cue, which means when this happens, I will do that, or if that does not happen, then I will do this instead. Either way, the response is to impulsively do what you've always done in similar situations. Now, when triggered by internal stimulus, the negative experience begins within. You first experience a negative memory, negative thought, or emotion. And to be clear here, you have not been influenced by anything or anyone out there. You have just recalled a bad experience from the past, or you just think or feel bad for no other reason than that you just do. And it could be that you are alone when this happens, or it could be that you are with people. And yet that experience within is not a reaction to what someone said, not a reaction to what you see. It was not provoked by another. It is just a conditioned behavior within your mind body that is automatically playing out. And then, because you feel negative within, you would speak and act in a way that affirms negativity, which can mean that you have a bad attitude, that you can talk things down, that you can sneer about things, that you can lope around. There are all sorts of ways that you can act negatively, which brings us on to the state shift. When you are triggered, you experience a shift in your psychological state, which means that your desires, thoughts, emotions, and agendas, they change. Your mind and body shifts into a different energetic state. And to give you an example of what that is like, a state shift is what happens when we feel hungry and get the impulsive urge to eat food. The mind body is utterly possessed and triggered by nothing else than strong desires, vivid images, and suggestive thoughts that are fixated upon the what, where, and the when will I eat. We are being driven towards obtaining food, where getting food is the main focus, the main attention, and the desired outcome. And once that desire has been satisfied, in this case you have eaten, your mind body then shifts into a different state and moves on to the next task. And we do unconsciously flip between different states of mind and behaviors without realizing that we do. State shifting is a normal de facto of life. We often shift into altered characteristics each time that we engage with different tasks and role plays that require a different mindset and skill. And we often become a different person from one moment and situation to the next. And when a negative state has arisen into your mind body, you will find that you have been triggered to escape from a psychological or physical discomfort. Those discomforts are typically related to some type of memory that has an emotional signature of fear, insecurity, trauma, or shame. We're talking about the fears of loss, harm, rejection, embarrassment, etc. We're talking about the insecurities that we have about our looks, our abilities, our performance, and our inferiorities. We're talking about the past traumas that we have that are triggered by present day situations. We're talking about the shames that we feel over things that we've done, the shames that we have about the things that make us feel unworthy, regretful, guilty, disgusted, and lesser. And I refer to these as FITS-based responses. FITS is the acronym for fears, insecurities, and shames. This means that whether it be perceived or real, whenever you experience a situation or environment that is similar to a time in the past that you were subjected to a severe or subtle type of harm, where you were made to feel powerless, inferior, or unworthy, this then triggers a conditioned response, a negative state of fear, insecurity, trauma, or shame within you that makes you feel flighty, evasive, or defensive towards the situation that you are responding to. Now let's move on to the next topic, an element of a negative feedback loop, and that is projection and reflection. This one is simple. Who you are within is what you project outwards into the world, where your perception determines your actions that manifests an outcome. And so if you are coming from a negative state of being, what do you think you will perceive and manifest? If you are feeling down, low, pissed off, angry, frustrated, how good or bad do you think the world will look to you? Because when we project from the lens of a negative state, negativity is what we see and create. Furthermore, your actions can affect the people that you relate to and communicate with, and through the process of action and reaction, and in accordance with the law of correspondence, the people that you communicate with can reflect back to you a similar version of what you have projected onto them, where the monkey see, the monkey react and do, albeit the monkey will do it slightly different to you. Therefore, What would happen if you verbally project negativity onto a loved one, a family member? It's likely that you will create conflict and end up arguing back and forth with that person. It's likely that they will give back as much negativity as you give out. They reflect negativity back to you. What would happen if you just expressed or behaved negatively and yet you didn't aim it directly at someone? Well, even if negativity is not directly aimed at someone, it can still indirectly affect them, in that they will reflect negativity back to you because it has been a triggered reaction in them. So a classic example of this would be where the young teenager is living in their bedroom with mess everywhere and food wrappers on the floor, and the parent is deeply unhappy about it, and so they're always complaining or screaming at them to clean the room up. And with that example, the point I'm making is this, that there is a projection and reflection relationship between who you are and how you manifest reality, and between how others receive and react to you. And when you are experiencing negative states more than less, what you project and what is reflected back to you is both triggering and affirming a negative feedback loop cycle, where your actions get a reaction and your behavior results in a consequence. Does that make sense? Now let's talk about consumption and production, because you are what you consume and produce. And if you consume and produce negativity, then this will affirm and reinforce negativity in your mind body. So where do we consume negativity? Well, if you eat and drink toxic products like junk food, then you will cultivate a junk mind and a junk body. And when I say junk food, we're talking about the sugary, trans fatty, processed and chemicalized foods. We're talking about alcoholic drinks, illicit and prescriptive drugs. Where else do we consume negativity? You could be consuming negative information on your social media feed. You could be listening to sad or angry music. You could be playing violent video games. You could be watching violent dramas, documentaries and horror movies on your television screen. You could be watching the news, and that for sure will affirm negativity. Where else do we consume negativity? Well, if you are entertaining negative people, then by a process of mental emotional transference, you will believe and accept into your mind body that negative energy. Emotional transference means that we are being affected within by the direct and indirect energies without. And when we interact with certain negative people, we are picking up on, reacting to and reflecting back their negative energy. So to recap, just think of those sad songs that tug on your heartstrings. Think about those tear-jerking films and documentaries that move you. With all of these examples, we get emotionally locked into these negative activities and people because they resonate with a negativity within, where like attracts like. Now, where do we produce negativity? Well, obviously we produce negativity from within, so through memory, thought, emotion, self-talk, and linguistics, we are producing negativity, where we cast these spells of negativity on ourselves and others. And also through creative expression, we produce negativity. So this can be produced in artwork, writing, journaling, acting, singing, and constructing, whereby we are continually locked into the creation of negativity, which is an outward expression of our inward impressions of negativity. Now let's move on to a topic called the psychosomatic condition. What does psychosomatic condition mean? Well, as we have already discussed, there is a tightly woven communication that exists between your mind and your body. You have a mind-body interaction, and this means that the state of your mind can affect the state of your body. And this is actually known as a psychosomatic condition. Psychosomatic means psycho, mind, somatic, body. And it is a terminology that can be used to describe how a negative state of mind can actually cause physical illness, dysfunction, or dis-ease within the body. And so how do we create a psychosomatic condition within the mind-body? We do so through expression and repression. So with expression, you already know that if you continue to repeat negative thoughts and emotions, negative self-talk, and speak negative words, then by conscious will, you will generate symptoms within the mind-body. Now let's look at repression. What does repression mean? Well, with repression, we are denying our negative thoughts and feelings. We are restraining, preventing, and inhibiting them from expression. Those thoughts and feelings that make us feel bad. We are ignoring them. We deceive ourselves that everything is fine when it is not. We tell ourselves little white lies. We ignore certain facts. We focus on anything other than the negative truth. The reason that we put our most troubling thoughts and feelings to one side is because we feel that they are too uncomfortable and painstaking to deal with, because we think that they are inappropriate, that we shouldn't be thinking and feeling this way, because they are too inconvenient to deal with in this moment and at this time, because we simply can't deal with them, and so we repress them out of the mind. The negativity gets repressed back down into the unconscious aspect of the mind and out of our awareness. What we don't want to be aware of, we press back down into the unawareness of our unconsciousness. Does that make sense? The problem is, though, that those unresolved negative thoughts and emotions, they don't disappear. They are contained within the mind-body, contained within your field of consciousness as a negative energy. And the more that you repress that negative energy, the more you compress it, the more it grows in power until it reaches a critical mass. That critical mass is where you can experience a major psychological event, a breakdown, a depression, an anxiety disorder or attack, or where that negative energy becomes a symptom within the body, a physical ailment of some sorts. In fact, all physical ailments are the result of a negative energy source, a trapped negative energy, a blockage of negative energy that has manifested as a physical ailment or even dis-ease somewhere in the body. The other way that we experience psychosomatic conditions is through our beliefs, which is to say that what we believe determines our state of being and doing. And to give you proof of that, we can look towards the placebo effect. There are numerous studies that have been published that clearly demonstrate that when pharmaceutical companies test new medical treatments, they have a control group of test patients that are given a blank pill with no active ingredients. And yet these test patients will experience the same positive effects as the non-control group of test patients that are given the active pills. And how? How is it possible for someone to get a reaction from an inactive medication? They get a reaction just by believing that they have been given the real treatment, where that belief was enough to set off a biochemical response inside their mind body. And here is where I want you to really pay attention. The placebo also has a darker sibling called the nocebo effect. Nocebo means I will harm in Latin, and this is where patients will experience negative reactions to a medical treatment simply because they believe and anticipate that something negative will happen, which clearly demonstrates that negative beliefs have the potential to create adverse conditions within the body. Negative beliefs can make us feel sick and weakened. And now we will finish this segment about the negative feedback loop by discussing the topic of the karmic debt cycle. Because ultimately, a negative feedback loop is a karmic cycle. What is a karmic cycle? Well, karma is a Buddhism term. It is a term that defines that for better or worse, the same circumstances will keep arising into our life because the same actions that we applied in the past are being repeated today that subsequently results in the same outcome in the future, which essentially means that we get stuck within the loop of the same behavioural patterns that get the same results. We keep doing the same thing over and over again each time that we encounter the same situation, and therefore we never make progress beyond that situation. In fact, we may even notice that there is a problem. We might be sick of the problem. We might want the problem to end. We might want something new and better to happen. We may even have expectations that things will get better or that someone will change on their own accord, and yet they don't. We still keep doing the same thing when presented with the same problem, which, by the way, is the definition of crazy, to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, which is a flawed and perverse logic. So let's get to the root cause of this. Exactly how does the karmic cycle of a negative feedback loop begin? Well, at some stage in our life, a negative event took place. That negative event took place in the past, and it can be as far back as when we were a young child. And that negative event is related to the negative event that keeps showing up in your life today. And this bit is crucial for you to remember. That past negative event is the first event that began the cycle of a negative feedback loop. It is the first time that you had this profoundly shocking, traumatic, and life-altering experience. And from that experience, you made a key decision. Consciously or unconsciously, you made a key decision that whenever you were faced with a similar situation in the future, that you would respond a certain way. And that response you decided on was to either escape from, defend against, or attack the object of your pain, with the intention to remove or lessen the pain or prove yourself able to handle and defeat the pain. And with that key decision, you discovered how to cope with and respond to that type of negative event, which is a good thing. However, at the same time, you also learned how to avoid the cause of the problem. And thus, you avoided investigating the problem. You avoided questioning the problem. You avoided truly understanding the problem. And although you learned a mental formula, a coping strategy that works in the moment and that gets you some type of relief from the problem itself still remains unresolved and intact. And so each time the problem arises into your life somewhere in the future, you keep replaying its negative feedback loop. You keep re-experiencing the negative state that is linked to and triggered by that problematic event or situation that keeps showing up in your life. And this is where I want to share with you a real life situation of an unresolved karmic cycle, a negative feedback loop that is reoccurring between my daughter Sienna and her mother. So here is the situation. Right now, my daughter is going through a negative experience at school. She struggles to make friends. She has little interest in the subjects at school. She is always getting into trouble with teachers. She experiences acute social anxiety. Basically, she's not getting on well in her schooling environment. And even though Sienna is a very bright kid, she once came third or fourth, I think, in a UK national exams for her year, the school environment is just not right for her. The school environment is having a detrimental impact on her mental, emotional and physical welfare. And so Sienna's negative experience at school is now a big problem in the family household. There are many mornings that she is in a foul mood because she does not want to go into school. And some days she will just outright refuse to go in, and she will cause a massive scene, protesting, just so that she can stay at home. When she does go into school, she will skip classes, refuse to participate in trips and activities, and she often arrives into school late and leaves early. And sometimes at school she will find herself on her own, where sometimes she gets so upset that she hides away in the toilets and she cries. And like I said, the school environment and experience is not for Sienna. It's just not for her. And it's clear to see this. It's clear to see that the school is distressing her and causing more harm than good. So to resolve this negative problem, the solution is very simple: to remove Sienna from the school and find alternative education. Simple. But this has not happened, and here is why. In relation to the school situation, Sienna is embroiled in a negative feedback loop and karmic cycle with her mother. Her mother refuses to remove her from the school. Now, why would her mother do that when the problem is obvious to see? Why can her mother not see and accept that the only solution is to remove Sienna from the school and seek alternative education? Well, there are a number of reasons for this. Her mother fears that Sienna won't get a proper education. Her mother fears that Sienna won't be a normal child like the other children. Her mother fears that Sienna won't get an education with good grades, and this could reduce her options in the future. Her mother fears that Sienna could start to slack, not have a purpose and motivation, and this could affect her mental health. And these are all very legit concerns and worries. And so this refusal to address the problem with the right solution is why the negative feedback loop keeps replaying. This problematic situation keeps replaying because Sienna and her mother are also getting positive compensations. You see, when Sienna gets her way, and she often does, she gets to stay at home, skip school and skip the schoolwork. She also gets to spend time on social media with her friends, and she gets to remain within the comforts of home. Furthermore, all children crave attention from their parents, and when they can't get positive attention, then negative attention will do, because at least they are being noticed and heard. And with Sienna, when she creates drama over the problems at school, she is getting attention from her mother. This problem with the school, this ongoing drama, has become their personal, unique and intimate bond, even though it's actually a trauma bond. And as for the mother, the positive compensation is that she does not have to go through the upheaval, the challenge, the work, the process and the painstaking task of reorganising an alternative education for Sienna. And when the mother brushes this issue to one side because she just hasn't got time to deal with the problem, she can then continue on with the other and more pressing and important tasks that must be tackled that same day. And so, because the problem remains unresolved, both mother and daughter, they continue within the karmic cycle of this negative feedback loop. We have a child that is still being distressed at school and a mother that is adamant that she keeps going. And because this negative feedback loop is taking place unconsciously and reactively, both mother and daughter are both easily triggered by each other in the moment, where in the moment they both lack self-control and descend into conflict. And as this cycle continues, with each repetition of the negative event taking place, it is getting more intense, combative and volatile between the mother and daughter. They are accruing more and more negative debt in the form of negative confrontations, memories and resentments. And as you can imagine, I've made them both aware of the fact that they are caught within this karmic debt cycle. I have advised them both that it will only get worse if they continue and that it will only end once they both address with the issue and implement the solution. And yet, it still continues. But why? Because you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. You can't interfere where your interference is not welcomed or appreciated. And you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. And sometimes, to maintain your own peace of mind, you must not let yourself get dragged into someone else's bad karma. You must take a step back and let someone else deal with their own karma. And I myself am well versed in the consequences of bad karma. Back in my past, and for a long period of roughly 2 decades, I was embroiled within this ongoing nightmare of bad karma, where I was caught within cycles of negative feedback loops that stretched across every aspect of my life. And just to briefly share one of these negative feedback loops with you, I was caught within a karmic cycle that was related to my life purpose. And that cycle lasted for well over 20 years or so. You see, as a result of my family background and through societal conditioning, where I had developed this greed and lust for success and money, both success and money for me were inextricably linked. I had cultivated a strong belief that success meant money and that money meant success. And so I was always chasing the money and success. When it came to seeking a job or starting a new business venture, my whole thesis, my entire focus and intention was all about how much and how fast could I earn money and then buy and enjoy the luxurious trappings of success. I was so fixated on money to a point that I paid minimal attention towards the work I had to do to earn it. There was no consideration towards whether or not the work was suitable, enjoyable or sustainable for me. There was no due diligence, no contemplation, just me choosing a work purpose based upon its potential to earn money. Needless to say that key decision took me on a pathway of jumping from one failed career to the next and failing in many business ventures. I was always making bad choices because I was not aligned with the purpose of my true nature, like I am today. here with you now. And no matter how hungry I was for success and money, I would always find myself in very stressful positions, doing something that violated my true nature, doing something that I had to be fake at it to conceal my true feelings, and that caused me immense misery, where eventually the pains of working a job I despised would overcome the desire for money, and I would end up resenting whatever job or business venture that I was involved with, and that resulted in self-sabotage and failure. And because I never realized and actualized the potential of my true nature, because I was naive, unknowing and stupid, I didn't know any better. I was unaware that I was trapped within the negative feedback loop of a karmic cycle. I didn't even know what those terms meant, and so I would keep repeating the cycle of finding another ill-suited job or business venture and experience the suffering of stress and resentment, where the outcome was always self-sabotage and failure. And now that I have shared with you those two real-life examples of karmic cycles that happened to me and my daughter, you will now know that a karmic cycle is the result of an unresolved issue. Issues remain unresolved because we are in a state of limbo with the issue. We are confused, uncertain, hesitant and undecided about what is happening. And why? Because we lack the wisdom and confidence to know and do better. We have not learnt the knowledge, the lesson, the skill, the perspective, the alternative, the way that will provide the wisdom that resolves the issue. Because once the issue is resolved, the problem ends and the solution begins. And before we delve into the solution that ends the karmic cycle of a negative feedback loop, that ends the cycle that reinforces a negative state, I want to quickly summarize everything that we have explored and defined about the negative feedback loop. And so when we are stuck within the cycle of a negative feedback loop, we are reinforcing the conditions of that negative feedback loop in the mind body. We are reinforcing those negative states that we have associated to the experience. And when we distract ourselves from and deny the negative experience, the negative energy goes unexpressed and gets locked within to become a dark energy within that bubbles to the surface of our mind as the symptoms of anxiety and resentment, that inflicts the mind with a subtle to severe neurosis, that becomes the sensitivity that is easily triggered. And through continuous projection and reflection, consumption and production, actions and reactions, the mind-body starts to collate these astringent and acidic negative energetic conditions within. We journey down the pathway of self-diminishment, where at a greater rate of deterioration we decline in psychological, physiological and biological function and power. And so if we want to remove a negative state, remove a negative event, remove a negative experience and remove a negative situation from our life so that we can experience relief, freedom, personal growth and lifestyle development, then we need to break the karmic cycles of our negative feedback loops. You would need to experience a breakthrough change. A breakthrough change is where you break through and break free from the limitations, the self-harms, and the negatives to prevent you from experiencing more positive, and rewarding life, where you break through into long-lasting change. And there are 4 key components to a breakthrough change, where you must reconcile the past, rupture the patterns, reimagine the future, and recondition the mind-body. Let's first discuss the subject of reconcile the past. What does it actually mean to reconcile the past? Well, the reason that you are stuck within the karmic cycle of a negative feedback loop, and the reason that you always get triggered into a negative state, is because you have an unresolved issue from the past that is conditioned within your mind body, that has become a reoccurring fear, insecurity, trauma, or shame that keeps showing up in your life today. That results in a problematic behavioral pattern and consequence that keeps playing out. And until you have identified and resolved that issue of that past event and have learned its lesson and wisdom, then the negative states, it will remain as this unconscious trait that repeats. So to make a breakthrough change, you would need to reconcile the past, and this is something that I teach in the Mind Games online course and program. It is a 5-step process of where you identify with, accept, learn from, forgive, and then let go of that past issue. The next element of a breakthrough change is to rupture the pattern. This means that you need to break the negative behavioral patterns of your conditioned mind body. This means that for change to happen, you have to become disagreeable and unreasonable with yourself. You must refuse to go along with the suggestions of your mind. You have to break the patterns of your usual thinking, feeling, and doing. You have to go to war with yourself and go to work on yourself. You have to refuse to be the old you so that a new you can arise. And so to rupture your patterns, you need to first identify what your patterns are and then implement a pattern interrupt. And how will you interrupt the patterns of your behavior? It's very simple. At the critical point of the pattern, just before a pattern begins, when you know you are about to engage with a specific negative state, you do what I refer to as a seismic shift. A seismic shift is where you do something completely opposite. You redirect your mind body to an alternative activity. You refocus your attention on something else. You introduce a new behavior. This new behavior will either be a new thought, a new communication, a new action, or all 3 together. The new behavior will be an alternative response, a new approach that you have decided to deal with this problem in a positive manner, where you lean into something that you would usually escape from, where you don't participate in that something that you usually would, where you change the rules of the game, upset the status quo, rearrange the environment, and do something completely different to interrupt the usual pattern. The aim of the pattern interrupt is to disrupt, diffuse, unwire, and reverse the unconscious programming of your conditioned mind body, to short circuit the psychoneurological wiring of your negative state. And you will find that the more successful you are at disrupting a pattern, the more confident and skillful and efficient you will get at it. However, the first stumbling block is for you to accept that it is the conveniences, the securities, the comforts, the familiarities, and the pleasures of who you are, what you do, and what you get, that you have to accept that you're going to have to be without. Where implementing a pattern interrupt means that you have to do something that is uncomfortable. It means that you have to sacrifice something. It means that you have to go without. And realize now that a pattern interrupt will always encompass initial disruptive pains. And realize now that either the environmental, situational, or relational factors of your life must change, or that you must change your relationship to them. And to break negative habits and make positive progress, the type of pattern interrupt that you will need to implement in your life will be in direct proportion to the longevity, type, size, and potency of the old traits that you wish to break. The more entrenched your traits are, the greater the shift that you will need to make. And so let me give you a personal example of this. Many years back, I was addicted to watching televisions up to 5 hours per day. And for over 3 decades of my life, I had wasted my precious time on consuming unproductive garbage on the TV. Until I came to this realization, in that to find the spare time to do the personal development work that was required to make progress in my life, I had to overcome this one addiction. However, there were many failed attempts to unplug from my daily dose of digital stimuli. I tried to reduce my TV time. I even stuck a large sign across the TV screen that read, "Every time you watch me, you are not working on your dreams." It didn't work. I would just rip that sign off the TV and then lounge back into my conditioned programming. Pun intended. In fact, nothing worked to curtail my addiction. I was that much of a TV addict. So in the end, I was left with no other choice but to go cold turkey. And I actually threw the TV out with the garbage. I removed the external stimulus and trigger from my environment. Now, throwing the TV out of the house with the garbage, I appreciate, might sound too drastic for you. And yet that was the only way that I could break the habit of my 3-decade addiction. Needless to say, I was rewarded with 5 hours of free time to work on my self-development goals and enjoy new hobbies. Here is another personal example of what it takes to make a breakthrough change. It took multiple relapses and the severe trauma of several lifestyle collapses for me to finally realize and accept that in order for me to overcome a 2-decade-long addiction to alcohol and drugs, I had to disconnect from everything that I knew. Everything that I knew was in some way supportive of and triggering my alcohol and drug addiction. And I'm talking about the usual people, the usual places, the usual possessions, and the usual predicaments that we find ourselves. And they were all structured around my substance abuse. And so to make a seismic shift and break those patterns, I had to walk away from my entire life. Walk away from everything that I knew and relocate to a safe place that was stimulus-free. This seismic shift included me letting go of childhood friendships, not spending time with family members, removing myself from a stressful job, foregoing a social life where for over 5 years I practically lived like a monk on the outskirts of society and in complete isolation. I had to live in a way that was completely opposite to the life that had supported my addictions. And personal transformations do require us to be in a stimulus-free space, even if that means extricating from certain relationships and environments, even if that means ripping everything up and starting again fresh. And so whatever problems and hardships that you are going through in your life right now, whatever dire situations are causing you immense suffering, you need to realize that only by rupturing those patterns with a seismic shift in your behavior, location, and environment will you actually make a breakthrough change. Which brings me to the fact that you also need to reimagine the future. Now, why is this important? Because life is about transitioning from one moment to the next, about transitioning from the present day and into the future. And it makes absolute sense that you would prefer to transition from the unideal to the most ideal life that you could possibly imagine. And a big part of breakthrough change is to imagine and manifest an entirely new, better, improved, beneficial, fulfilling, and joyful version of you and version of your life. And for that, you need to imagine a different you and a different life, because you can't manifest a different you and a different life with the same perception that keeps this current life going. You can't change yourself and change your lifestyle with the same memories, thoughts, and emotions that got you here and keeps you here. And the key to manifestation is your creative imagination, because creative imagination is how you reimagine a different life, where you imagine a different you. And when you do what is known as image cycling, which means you continuously imagine the same thing over and over again inside your mind, you then create a memory. You internalize and embody that image. And that image changes your perception, and you start to focus on things that correlates with that image, where you start to project a different energy, where a different reality is reflected back to you, where what the mind perceives, the body then achieves. And if that image cycling is you cycling positive and worthy imaginations of a future you and a future life that you truly desire, then you will become the creator of a positive feedback loop, where your imagined positive experience within is a positive state of being that starts to create a positive event and experience without. Is that making sense? With everything that you have learned in this webinar so far, it should do. The next part of a breakthrough change is that you recondition the mind-body, which simply means that you must take massive action to rehearse, reinvent, redirect, recreate, and repeat positive behaviors that get you positive results until you have transformed yourself and your lifestyle with long-lasting positive results. And so, if those are the simple 4 stages of how you get a breakthrough change, then why don't you? Why can't you change? Well, here are 4 reasons why you can't change. You are self-sabotaging. You lack the self-awareness. You lack the self-control, and you lack the right strategy. Let's speak to all 4 of those right now. We begin with self-sabotaging. What does it mean to self-sabotage? Self-sabotage means that unconsciously or consciously, we limit, restrict, obstruct, avoid, damage, or destroy even an aspect of who we are and what we do, where you are doing certain things or not doing certain things that results in some type of harm, loss, or injury. And self-sabotaging behaviors are what prevents personal growth and lifestyle development. And when you look at some of the areas in your life, this would be immediately obvious to you. And there are also some areas in your life that you engage with self-sabotaging behaviors that are not so obvious. But why do you self-sabotage? Because think about it. Self-sabotage results in negative consequences that causes you suffering. So why would you cause harm to yourself? Why would you put yourself in harm's way? Well, remember that most of your deepest and strongest traits are unconscious conditions of your mind body. So you are acting autonomously, involuntarily, and reactively. And where roughly 90% of your unconscious psychology dominates your behavior, where that 95% dominance will always try to subvert and override the weaker 5% power of your conscious awareness and willpower to change. And if the majority of your unconscious traits are negative, then you will have little control over those negative conditions within. Even if you wanted to stop and change because you've had enough pain, that 95% conscious power will override those new desires to stop. Next, when trying something new, it will always feel uncomfortable, and you will find it a stress and a struggle to break old patterns and introduce new habits. And for that reason, you are likely to regress back to your old ways when the going gets tough and when you feel tired. Furthermore, the guiding values and beliefs of your fixed identity are so deeply embedded within the psychoneurological fabric of the unconscious aspects, it's difficult to deviate from its default mode, in that you feel uncomfortable, uncertain, and weird even to think, feel, and act as someone that is different to the fixed identity that you identify with. And the default mode of your fixed identity is continually reminding, nudging, and directing you back to your old ways by the internalized memories, thoughts, and emotions of your fixed identity. The fixed identity will always pull you back into a negative state. Whenever you try to make a change, the fixed identity will always be trying to readjust back to its default mode. The fixed identity is a major psychological barrier to prevent you from doing the self-development work that's required to upgrade your life conditions. Everything that you truly desire to be and have exists outside of the fixed identity. The other reason that you can't change, that you can't break through your negative states, is because you lack the self-awareness. This means that you are not fully aware of what you're doing and not fully aware of why you're doing it. In that you lack awareness about the self. You lack the awareness of why yourself thinks and behaves the way you do. You don't know where and when you are being triggered. You don't know how and why that process plays out. And so you lack the recognition and self-knowledge to change that pattern. And so to be unaware of the negative patterns that you are stuck in is very much like you're walking around a forest in circles. You don't realize that you are walking through the same pathways in the forest, which means that you always end up circling back to the same place and you never find your way out. And because you don't have the self-awareness, you lack the self-control, because you can't control that about the self to which you are unaware of about the self. And whilst your negative states remain as these unconscious traits that are conditioned within your mind body, they will be autonomous, impulsive, reactive, and involuntary traits, which means that you will act on autopilot mode, like a robot that follows the commands of a pre-programmed operating system, where you just think, say, and behave a certain way and do so with no pause, consideration, or constraints. Instead of being a conscious driver of your mind, you have become the unconscious passenger of your mind. Which brings us both to this: you lack the right strategy. You see, one fundamental fact needs appreciation. You can't change by doing what you already know. Effective change is only possible when doing something completely different that gives you a new result. Results are obtained by working with a strategy. Even so, there are bad results and good results. So if, for example, you were to embark on a breakthrough change with the wrong strategy or an unproven strategy, the likelihood is that you will encounter problems and painstaking mistakes along the way, and potentially fail by not getting the result that you set out for. To guarantee breakthrough success, you will need a results-based strategy. This will be a proven strategy that gives you a set procedure of actionable tasks designed to produce a specific outcome in your life. The right strategy will clearly define a way to get the result with an easy to follow blueprint map that gets you from A to point B, where you have a set structure with protocols and a course of actions. Life coaching, health and fitness training regimes, dietary plans are all classic examples of workable strategies that are structured with action plans, whereby you model the proven practices of an organization or person that has already mastered and produced the result that you desire. Always remember that someone somewhere in this world has already been where you've been and has discovered a winning formula. What took them decades of sweat equity and umpteen failures as they figured out the winning formula, well, with their tried and tested strategy, you can succeed in a fraction of a time. With a proven results-based strategy, you will avoid the costly mistakes and unnecessary setbacks and save yourself many years of painful trial and error. Following the wisdom and advanced knowledge of an expert, you will get to your chosen destination with more elegance, efficiency, and effectiveness. How, therefore, will you know to choose the right strategy? It is simple. Investigate before you invest. Do your due diligence on the organization or the individual. Study their track record and results and get a preview or trial run of their strategy before you decide to purchase it. And so I now want to summarize what you have learned so far in this webinar. So far, you have learned that chronic negative states are unconscious traits that are conditioned within the mind body, and therefore, until you have resolved and removed these conditions from the mind body, you will always be subject to the terms of those conditions. These negative unconscious traits will always remain as the unmastered parts of who you are, that are without temperance, constraint, free will, and virtue. And you may fantasize that you can make massive personal transformations anytime that you choose, and yet you are instead an unconscious slave to your mind body's conditioning, and therefore you operate in a state of free won't. Free won't is the lack of free will. Free won't change the way it behaves. Free won't give up those pleasurable habits. Free won't concede that its way of thinking and doing is wrong and harmful. Free won't thinks that it's in control, and free won't be told otherwise. And until you realize how and why your conditioned mind body will always be working against you, working against any positive changes that you want to make, you will always be caught within its current cycle of negative states. And so please do realize that your old mental formulas do not formulate better outcomes. You can't change by doing the same thing over and over. If you are continuously experiencing bad thoughts, bad emotions, and bad lifestyle consequences where you are continually stressed, miserable, or unfulfilled, then obviously you have a bad mental formula that keeps manifesting that bad result. Therefore, change the mental formula and you change the result. You need to start playing better mind games. So if you want to overcome negative states such as anxiety, stress, neurosis, addiction, bipolar or depression, etc., then the breakthrough change starts when you learn more about who you are and why you do the things you do. You must become knowledgeable and aware of the psychological patterns and processes that are unconsciously sabotaging you. To become someone better, you must transcend the worst aspects of self, and to do that, it is essential that you truly understand how your mind works. You need a foundational understanding of the mechanics and processes of how your mind-body directs your behavior. Knowing exactly what mind games that you play will endow you with the awareness to take self-control and start redirecting yourself to the most ideal life that you can possibly think of. Because what has been conditioned can be unconditioned and then reconditioned. What has been learned can be unlearned and then relearned. What has been wrong and faulty can be made right and fixed. And new actions get new results. And the right action is to embark on a journey of cultivating mental wealth where you can enrich your experience of life with a solution-orientated mind that is focused on optimism, abundance, love, happiness, and inner peace. All of the good stuff that feels great. And so I want to now explore with you these two quotes. The first one is, "What's left in the unconscious becomes fate." First quote means that what we say is fate is actually a development of situational events that beyond our awareness, those events have resulted from the actions of our unconscious traits. In other words, nothing happens by fate. Most of what takes place in our life is because of unconscious intentions, desires, and mind programming. And we just happen to be unaware of it. That most of the situations that we find ourselves have arrived and manifested because the mind and body is conditioned to unconsciously will itself into those situations. And by will itself, I mean to seek out, to arrive at, to participate in, to give consent to acquiesce and to accept. Where there is an unconscious part of who we are that by unconscious will has influenced, manipulated, allowed, welcomed or submitted to a situation that's taking place in our life. Second quote is, "What's left unresolved in the unconscious becomes bad luck." The second quote means that when we experience some type of misfortune or hardship that we call bad luck, well actually it has nothing to do with bad luck. Bad luck is to infer and concede that some type of upset and failure has occurred because of chance or because of circumstances that are beyond one's control, than rather being a result of one's own actions. And yes, situations do arise into our life unexpectedly and often without request or permission that are beyond our control, and yet it is how we choose to respond to those situations that determines how the situation will unfold and end. The choice is always with us. If, however, we have unresolved issues from past experiences where the mind is emblazoned with the emotional states of fear, insecurity, traumas and shames, then we will project those unresolved issues and states into our present day experiences, and those unresolved issues and states, they influence every choice that we make. And so what we call bad luck, not fair, never goes right, always happens to me and why can't I catch a break, and whatever other reasons that you apportion to the negative situations in life, well, those negative situations aren't random or happenstance. Those negative Situations keep showing up in your life because you keep unconsciously reacting to those situations through the conditioned filters of your unresolved negative issues and states. In other words, you keep reliving the same bad karma of your unresolved past life experiences. You keep projecting bad, attracting bad, and this reinforces the bad within. And the cycle repeats. And the only way to break a bad lifestyle cycle is to become aware of the psychology and behavioral patterns of that cycle and then implement a breakthrough strategy to get a positive change and result. And so, what to do now? Well, you can do nothing. You can go back to your life and continue forth as you are with some insightful information that you have learned and that you may soon forget as the duties and demands of your life steal away your attention, and where perhaps you will continue to experience the same problems, challenges, mistakes and failures as the result of negative states and self-sabotage. Or you can do something. You can realize how important it would be for you to understand your mind, your behaviors and your life, where you can decide to go on a journey of personal transformation and growth and cultivate a life that expresses your truest, highest and fullest potential, where you cultivate mental and lifestyle wealth. But the question I need to ask you is this: have you reached a place where enough is enough? Have you grown tired of any mental anguish that troubles you? Do you feel sick and tired of making the same mistakes in life that result in the same negative consequences of harm, loss and injury? Are you fed up with not getting the things that you truly desire from life? Do you want to start making positive breakthrough changes so that you can start rising upwards and onwards towards the most ideal life that you can possibly think of and achieve? If you've answered yes to any of those questions, then I would like to give you an open invitation to join the Mind Games exclusive membership program and community, where we focus on mental and lifestyle wealth creation. So what is the Mind Games membership program and community? Well, it is an online self-development course that enlightens, educates and empowers you with knowledge, wisdom and philosophy, where I teach you about human behavioural psychology, where I provide you with proven psychotherapeutical tools, techniques and strategies in which to cultivate mental and lifestyle wealth, where you also become part of an online wealth creation group where you can join like-minded people, join forces to share personal experiences and results, where people that are on the same journey of creating mental and lifestyle wealth come together to support and guide each other, where you will get the opportunity to form both personal and business collaborations that will help you get the results that you need and desire more effectively. So, when you become a member of the Mind Games program, you will learn to play the right mind games. You will go through the online course and master 5 mind game strategies that will radically transform, uplift and gift you a new lease of life. And on this course, the first mind game strategy you play is called the resolution game. Within this mind game strategy, you will explore and resolve the negative aspects of these 12 human archetypes and resolve any problematic characteristic traits that you have. You will undertake a process of self-exploration using these powerful psychotherapeutic questions that will guide you to identify with and understand the cause and patterns of your self-sabotaging behaviors and negative states. You will do what's known as the shadow work to unveil those unconscious traits so that you emerge as a fully absolved, an integrated being that is more self-knowledgeable, more self-aware, more self-knowing, and more self-determining. The next game you'll play is called the reverse thinking game. This is a powerful mind control technique that improves the way you communicate with others, where you will identify with undesirable outcomes in your relationships and then become someone that can respond to people in a way that produces a desirable outcome. It is simple. Wherever there is a negative consequence as a result of your thinking and communications, you will reverse what you think and say in which to elicit a positive consequence. And you can literally turn your entire life around by reversing your thoughts. With the third game, you play what's called reframe the game. This is a proven psychological reframing technique that upgrades the quality of your perception. You will learn how to revise a negative history by rewriting your experience of it. You will learn how to upgrade your present-day problems with the power of positive storytelling. You will come to see that there is an upturn within every downturn. You will be able to transmute life's tragedies into life's triumphs. You will turn obstacles into opportunities that will excel your progress. You will flip pessimism into optimism. You will transmute your limitations into leverages to get more of what you desire. You will learn how to reframe the game of life so that you win more often. The fourth mind game strategy is called the equalizer game. With this mind game strategy, you will master a powerful equalizing technique, a unique questioning skill that will make you this reckoning force of balance and harmony. You will identify with unfair and misfortunate situations and events in your life and then use this equalizer technique to see the hidden benefits in the drawbacks, to see the good within the bad, to see the positive intention behind the negative expression, to take life's liabilities and transmute them into your assets, whereby you trade expectations for appreciations and start to cultivate value and self-worth, where you come to see that every life experience, even those which are misfortunate and unfair, that they have a positive value, virtue and wisdom that will enhance the quality of your life with deeper meaning and higher purpose. You will come to see that every life experience, even those which are misfortunate and unfair, that they have a positive value, virtue and wisdom that will enhance the quality of your life with deeper meaning and higher purpose. And then the final mind game strategy of this course is called the wealth exaltation game. Here I will teach you a key mind game strategy that shows you how to rethink, redesign, reinvent, re-internalize, reposition and repurpose who you are as an individual so that you orient yourself towards experiences that get you more of the positive results that you truly desire. In this final mind game strategy, you will exalt your lifestyle by designing new archetypal disciplines, these divine disciplines that are tailor-made by you to unfold your truest, highest and fullest potential, where you will evolve into a supreme being with imaginative, optimistic, creative and critical thinking powers that allows you to safely navigate this world and whilst you cultivate your dream ambitions. And so if this is something that you are interested in, if you think that by doing this online program and becoming part of the community will provide you with everything that you need to turn your life around and to dial your life up, and that will breathe new life into you, if you want to start living a success story, then I have a generous offer for you. You can get immediate access to the exclusive membership and online course and community, where I will deliver to you an online course of over 30 tutorial videos, a download of the Mind Games guidebook that teaches you about the 12 human archetypes, about negative states, and that gives you all of the right mind game strategies, which is a package of immense value that will guide you to make profound breakthrough changes in your life, which is a package that comes with over 30 years of my experience, knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and skills, which is a package that has taken me over 2 years to design and formulate to ensure that it gives you effective and efficient results, which is a package that gives you full support via email, live and interactive video calls with me, which is a package that is updated with new content and skills so that you get a continuous upgrade of psychological tools that help you to develop and enhance your mindset and lifestyle, which is also a package that comes with unlimited lifetime access to this online course and membership from any device. And so, how much does it cost you to become a Mind Games exclusive member and get access to this online course? Well, listen, I'm not going to insult your intelligence today, nor am I going to deploy any underhand sales tactics in which to exploit your emotions, which means I won't be giving you this hyper overinflated upfront price that is designed to give you an impression of immense value and then shock drop that price to some heavily discounted price so that it triggers a buying impulse in you. No, I don't want you to buy this product and become an exclusive member of the Mind Games program and community just because you've been given a financial incentive. I want you to become a member because you have a genuine need and desire to do so, because this is just what you need at this stage in your life. So don't let price be a determining factor, but instead be guided by your intuitions. So let's get to the cost of this exclusive membership. What I do want you to know is that the market value of this product is £396 or thereabouts. However, I'm not selling this product at the market value, and there is a very important reason for this. That reason is that one of my guiding values is to serve humanity, and in doing so, make my teachings as available, as accessible as possible. And I realize that £396 is a cost barrier for a lot of people, that the market value of this membership and product would prevent a lot of people from getting the help and support that they really need. And so, keeping in line with my values, I decided to do a price reduction and sell this membership, an online course, for £96.30. So essentially, you're getting something for a quarter of its value, which is an amazing opportunity, right? And then I thought to myself, how can I completely remove all price barriers so that price would not be an issue for anyone that wanted to get access to this membership and product? And that's when I came up with the generous offer of £39.60. So that's £39.60 to get unlimited access to the entire Mind Games exclusive membership program, course, and community. And furthermore, that comes with a 100% money back guarantee within 30 days of the purchase. And so if for whatever reason you are not getting the content and results that I have promised, I will return your money back. So now you would have every reason to purchase this product, and with no financial risk whatsoever, if you truly feel and think that this is right for you. And so if you are 100% certain this is for you, you can click the link below this webinar presentation and it will direct you to a simple purchase page, or you can copy and paste the link into your browser and it will direct you to the same page. And so, my friend, I end this webinar presentation by saying that I have showed up today and played my part, that I have made you aware of crucial aspects of human psychology and behavioural patterns, that I have discussed the problems and directed you to the solutions, that I have guided you with the warnings, the wisdoms, and the ways, where I am incredibly grateful for your time and patience to be with me today. And so if you have taken me up on the generous offer to join the Mind Games exclusive membership, then I look forward to seeing you on the other side. We've got some great things to be doing together. If you've decided, however, to pass up my generous offer, then I do wish you the very best on your life journey. And so that really is it. With great love from me to you. Take care for now.